George was born on April 8th, 1937 in Dagenham, UK. He grew up with his mom, Sarah, dad, John, known as Jock, and his brother, John, as well, named John, in Kilmarnock, Scotland, which is about a 20-minute drive inland from Troon and 45 minutes from Glasgow. He started school at 4 years of age in a one-room schoolhouse only a mile away from his home. After high school, Dad joined the Royal Marines. He never really talked about it too much, but we always thought it was the coolest thing ever that Dad was a Green Beret. When he was done serving in the Marines, he was excited to travel and explore life more outside Scotland, but his decision to immigrate to Canada was not planned. He was asked by his uncle, his mom's brother, to join him in Rio Grande in Brazil. He packed his bags, and at the same time, his Canadian cousins were visiting him and his family in Kilmarnock from Verdun. They offered Dad a place to stay in Montreal while he established himself, and that was it. In 1958, he crossed the ocean, leaving his family behind, landed in Montreal, and started working at CPR Company for what Dad called a piddly wage in voucher dispersing. He quickly learned that going to school would land him better opportunities, so he decided to earn a university degree. After a few years, he completed his bachelor's in economics and geography from Sir George Williams, which is now Concordia. From there, Dad joined National Sales Company after seeing that travel was a big part of the job offer. Through his career, he progressed from purchasing to president and loved all of his jobs and all of the traveling that came with it. Dad retired in 1995 at age 58. In between, he met Mom, completed his family, took us all overseas to live, and then came back and traveled all over the world. Because Dad loved to travel, we were also so lucky to travel. It felt special back when we were growing up, but looking back, it was such a privilege, and we were so blessed to be able to make memories all over the place. How lucky are we that we were able to watch Cirque du Soleil in Royal Albert Hall in London, or go to the watersides in Holland, or ride donkeys in Spain, drive ATVs in South Padre Island, go to a 24-hour Le Mans race in France, swim close up with dolphins in Turks and Caicos, and so many more things. But apart from the traveling itself, Dad loved a good adventure, and adventure seemed to find us when we did travel. There was one time that we boarded a Delta flight from Montreal to Miami. There was a bomb scare on board, so we all had to evacuate. Dad was a trooper and walked back to the terminal with Mark while we hopped on a bus. Dad never complained, and he was eager to jump back on the plane just so we could get going. And another time when we lost our bags in Los Angeles and had to hang out in dirty clothes the whole time and sleep in housecoats. But Dad always stayed calm, and nothing ever fazed him. To him, it was all part of the adventure. He didn't mind, as long as we were all together. That's one thing about Dad. He loved his family so much. In fact, he loved people who weren't family, and treated them as if they were. Mom, his children, and all of the grandkids meant the world to him. He wasn't just an amazing dad, he was an exceptional granddad, or papa as everyone called him. He also loved us all equally and unconditionally. People used to say that Mark was the favorite back in the day, but then he crashed a car and had a big house party, and then I gained some traction. But seriously, Dad loved us all with all of his heart, never judged, held grudges, or made us feel anything less than super special. He was incredibly patient, kind, generous, calm, fun, silly, really smart, and proud of all of us. When we were growing up, Dad was very involved in activities, especially sports. He would come to many of my soccer games and actually watch them. He would comment on when I made a fancy pass or scored a goal and told me how proud he was. Sometimes it was so hot and I had to play 2 or 3 games in a row if I got called up to play with the older teams to fill in, but he didn't mind and he never complained. He would drive Mark and I to Rod Roy skiing lessons every Saturday in winter at the crack of dawn, and would be waiting for us in the Beaconsfield Shopping Center parking lot when we returned. Sometimes he would have to wait, sometimes he would have to wait a while for us to get off the bus, but we never waited for him, ever. Dad was always on time. Punctuality was super important to him, and this carried over to us. We also value punctuality and time management, and that's because of Dad and Mom. When I went to Queen of Angels, Dad and I had lots of time in the car because he drove me to school every morning. We would play ABBA or Queen Greatest Hits, and chat about school, funny things on the radio, TV shows, and trivia. I didn't realize it then, but we had the best chats. As a grown-up, we continued to have the best chats. Dad would drive over to my house for coffee or tea or something stronger, and we would talk about current events, politics, and silly shows we watched. Dad wasn't only a really interesting person, but he was a stellar listener. He was a master conversationalist and could watch and could and would chat with anyone about anything. It was one of his many superpowers. One of the greatest conversations, was very recently when we went out for Mom and Dad's birthday dinner in April. Just the four of us. It was Dad, Mom, Mark, and me. It hadn't been just us in over 20 years. We chatted about the usual stuff, but also about memories, adventures, bucket lists, accomplishment, health, and family. We only took one car, so we continued to chat as we decided to drive by two childhood homes that Mark, Mary Ann, and I grew up in Strasbourg and Viking and Dollard. It was spontaneous, nostalgic, fun, and magical. We had no idea that that would be our last conversation with the four of us together, but it's better that way, and we chatted as if it were anyways. Even in the hospital, we had the best talks. I would ask him if he was liking having to take a break from making Mom tea, but he told me that he really enjoyed making her tea and he was used to it. He spoke about Mom all the time, and he adored her every day, no matter what. You see, Mom and Dad had the best love story, unlike any I've ever seen. They met when Mom was Dad's secretary at a Bureau Tobacco, and although it was a bit scandalous, they fell in love and stayed close to each other for 50 years. Sometimes they would write cards to each other in shorthand and giggle, and it kind of grossed us out because we could think of the possibilities of those mysterious love notes. Dad and Mom were besties. They were life partners, travel buddies, jokesters. Well, Dad was more of a jokester. And Dad was Mom's personal tea maker for life. He probably made 55 million cups of tea. George, can you put the kettle on? And he always did with a smile or sometimes a Jesus Christ. And Dad used to rub Mom's feet. Yep. It kind of grossed us out too. Watching Jeopardy with Mom's feet being massaged. But Dad didn't mind, and if he did, he rubbed her feet anyways. And if that's not love, I don't know what is. Speaking of love, Dad loved apple pie and mode, but he more liked apple rhubarb pie. Actually, Dad loved ice cream, all kinds of flavors, and he really loved rice pudding. He also loved Mom's roasts, but who didn't? He loved pasta marinara, chicken Caesar salads, egg McMuffins, Thai soups and noodles, peas, mint sauce on everything, imported beers, coffee, and tea, but he very disliked cauliflower and broccoli and peanut butter, and most of all, he despised corn. Mom would even make him shepherd's pie without it. Growing up, once in a while, Dad would make Chinese food. We loved it. It was good, and it got pretty excited every time he was gonna make it. We thought he was a stellar culinary chef at the time, but we only realized in our later teens or maybe early 20s that Dad's Chinese food was really fried steak cubes with packages of ramen noodles sprinkled with soy sauce. But boy, he made it really well, and I still crave it from time to time. Dad would experiment in the kitchen and come up with some signature dishes, like his delicious vegetable soup and famous fish pie. He would make the biggest messes and mix together the weirdest stuff, and sometimes, but once in a while, he would invent an amazing dish, and it was cordon bleu worthy. That was another one of Dad's magical powers. Just like his ambitious cooking facts, there are other things that a lot of people do not know about Dad, so I'll share a few fun facts before wrapping up. I bet you didn't know that Dad won Best Legs contest in Miami, Florida, in 1984. I also bet you didn't know that Dad got his first speeding ticket on the Mercia Bridge in his 60s, and a few since. Actually, I think he got one like a month ago, 2 months ago. He got paid. Some of you know that Dad is colorblind, but most of you don't know that he used to go to work sometimes with mismatching shoes. One brown and one black. Sue, the secretary at the time, would call Mom, and Mom would be mortified. What most of you don't know is that Dad killed a mega humongous tarantula in Cyprus with a gun while serving in the Marines. He said it was way too massive to be dealt with in any other way, so he had to annihilate it. Pretty sure some people here know that Dad's Scottish accent only came out when he was mad. It wasn't often, but it was a thing. And another thing is that he did not say Wednesday, he says Wednesday, always. Oh, and some know this too, but Dad didn't stir coffee like a typical person. No, I don't know if you remember. Most people stir coffee normally. Dad would, he would gallop with a spoon for like 5 minutes. And then when he was done, he'd climb the side like a cymbal. That was his finale. And most of you don't know that Dad once gave me a keychain so I wouldn't lose my keys anymore. It was a nice keychain, a key ring that he attached to a 2x4 piece of wood. It said Amy's keys. And I still have it. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it, which is ironic, because it's here. Oh, and I don't know if anyone knows that Dad took knitting in school. Yes. He said he couldn't cast off, but he could do plain and pearl stitches. Nanny would be proud. Dad also didn't brush his hair like a normal person. He must have thought that the handles were for sissies. But Dad would brush his hair this, always. So he did leave the handle as a tail. He did have ultra soft hair though, so maybe that was a secret. You know, Dad had many isms, and that's what made him so quirky, so special, and so likable. And everybody was loved by Dad. He was an incredible person, and he had an incredible life. And because of this, we are blessed with the most amazing memories and so much love in our hearts. Thank you, Dad, for everything. We love you, we miss you, and we will continue to share your memory forever and all of your stories.